Hey there, deep divers. Welcome back to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to be looking at something that's a little bit crazy, a little bit unexpected, and honestly, something that's got the whole world talking and scratching their heads a bit.
Yeah, this Trump-Zelensky Summit back in February.
Yeah.
Nobody really expected it to go the way it did.
On paper, it looks so simple.
It was supposed to be a chance for the U.S. and Ukraine to really show that they're on the same page. Agreements, some support for Ukraine in the war with Russia, that kind of thing. But wow.
It blew up.
It really did.
Yeah. And we're talking about like public rebukes, canceled deals, and just this wave of tension that everybody felt.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating about this whole thing is that it wasn't just like a random outburst. This summit actually exposed a bunch of cracks that were already there in the relationship between the U.S. and Ukraine.
So it wasn't just Trump having a bad day or something.
No. This has been building for a while, especially with the different views on how the war with Russia should be handled.
And let's be honest here. Trump telling Zelensky, you should be grateful to America, that's not exactly how you talk to another world leader.
Not in diplomatic circles, no. It's a pretty big breach of protocol.
Right. And to top it all off, you've got VP J.D. Vance. He was like a bull in a china shop, just interrupting Zelensky constantly and just turning the heat up even more.
Yeah, Vance's behavior definitely didn't help things. It felt like he was almost trying to make things worse.
Like sabotage the summit.
Almost, it makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes in the Trump administration.
So no luncheon, no joint press conference. They didn't sign that mineral agreement.
Right.
Zelensky basically ran for the door and then bam. The U.S. suspends military aid and intelligence sharing.
Big consequences.
Huge.
It was a massive blow to Ukraine, especially at such a critical moment in the war.
You have to wonder what everyone else was thinking watching this unfold. Did any other countries step up to fill that gap left by the U.S.?
Yeah, well, the global reaction was interesting. There was a lot of concern from Western nations, especially in Europe, and a lot of them actually doubled down on their support for Ukraine.
So they saw the U.S. kind of stepping back.
Right. It was like they recognized that things were shifting and they needed to take a stronger stance.
So are we saying that Europe is ready to take the lead now? Is this a power shift in action?
It's possible this could be the push Europe needs to become more independent on the world stage, especially when it comes to security.
Wow, a more independent Europe. That's not something you hear every day.
It's definitely a big deal, and we're already seeing some European countries looking to boost their military and work together more on defense.
Like they're realizing they can't just rely on the U.S. anymore.
Exactly. It's almost like the world is becoming less about one big superpower and more about several powerful players all trying to figure out where they fit in.
Okay, so the U.S. is maybe taking a step back.
Sure.
Europe's maybe stepping up, and of course, we can't forget about Russia. They must be loving this whole situation, right?
Yeah. I mean, from their perspective, this summit was a win. It weakens Ukraine and gives them more leverage.
Speaking of leverage, Trump has been pushing for these peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. Sounds good, but I have a feeling it's not that simple.
You're right to be skeptical. Trump's idea of peace involves Ukraine making some pretty big concessions, like giving up territory and forgetting about joining NATO.
So Zelensky is in a tough spot. He's got Russia on one side, and then the U.S., his supposed ally, is pushing him to give up a lot.
And on top of all that, Russia has set some pretty demanding conditions for even starting these peace talks.
Like what?
They want Ukraine to give up not only Donbass and Crimea, but also any hope of joining NATO. They're basically saying, give us everything and then we'll talk.
That's a hard bargain.
It is, and it highlights just how complex this situation is.
So we've got internal resistance in Ukraine, Russia demanding a ton, and all these different European interests. It's like a giant tangled mess.
And the stakes couldn't be higher for everyone involved.
But why is this NATO thing such a big deal? I mean, it seems like a diplomatic issue, not something that should make or break a whole country.
Well, for Ukraine, joining NATO is more than just diplomacy. It's about their survival. It's the strongest protection they could have against Russia.
So it's not just about paperwork. It's about their future.
Exactly. Their security, their independence, everything.
So we've got the U.S. potentially stepping back, a more asserted Russia, and Ukraine's stuck in the middle. What does all this mean for Europe? Is this their chance to step up on the world stage?
That's the big question, isn't it? As the U.S. takes a step back, Europe has a real opportunity to fill that void.
Are we talking about the EU becoming like a superpower?
Maybe not a superpower in the traditional sense, but definitely a more influential player on the world stage.
Yeah.
They're already looking at ways to support Ukraine more, both militarily and economically.
It makes sense. If they can't rely on the U.S., they need to find other ways to protect themselves.
Exactly. And this situation might be the push they need to develop a stronger, more unified defense system in Europe.
So more tanks, more jets, more European unity. This is a lot to take in.
It is. And we haven't even touched on the economic side of things yet.
Oh, yeah, because all this political drama is bound to have some serious economic consequences.
Absolutely. This summit breakdown is adding a whole lot of uncertainty to an already shaky global economy.
Well, on that cheery note, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll be diving into those economic shockwaves and what they could mean for all of us. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive into this summit fiasco between Trump and Zelensky. We were just talking about how Europe might be stepping up as the U.S. takes a step back.
Yeah, a more independent Europe. Who would have thought?
And, you know, we talked about all the political fallout, but now we need to talk about what it means for regular people, the economic side of things.
Because let's be honest, global power shifts are interesting and all, but they don't really hit home until they start messing with our wallets.
Exactly. So let's get down to brass tacks. What are some of the economic shockwaves we might see from all this?
Yeah, where do those dominoes start falling?
Well, energy is a big one, especially for Europe.
Right, they're still pretty dependent on Russia for gas.
Exactly, and that makes them vulnerable. You know, what happens if Russia decides to use that to their advantage?
Like turn off the gas taps.
It's a possibility, and even if they don't go that far, we're likely to see a lot of instability in energy prices, and that's going to have ripple effects throughout the European economy.
So businesses will have to deal with higher costs. People will see it in their heating bills and at the gas pump.
Exactly. And in some cases, it could even lead to energy rationing.
So no more long hot showers.
Well, maybe not quite that drastic, but it's a possibility.
And what about those rare earth minerals we talked about before, the ones Ukraine was supposed to be supplying?
Yeah, that's another big concern. Those minerals are essential for so many industries, from smartphones and laptops to electric cars and even defense systems.
Oh, we're talking about the stuff that makes the modern world run.
Exactly. And this summit breakdown is throwing a wrench in the works.
So does that mean like even longer wait times for the new iPhone or more expensive electronics?
It's definitely possible, and it could also lead to production delays for things like electric vehicles.
This is starting to sound pretty serious.
It is. The global economy is incredibly interconnected. When one part gets disrupted, it can have knock-on effects everywhere.
It's like that butterfly effect thing. You know,
Yeah.
A summit implodes in Washington and suddenly your phone is delayed and your energy bill goes up in Berlin.
Exactly. It's a reminder of just how interconnected we all are.
Okay, so we've got energy problems,
Yeah.
potential supply chain chaos, and maybe rising prices on everything. So should we be stocking up on canned goods and learning how to knit our own clothes?
I wouldn't recommend going full doomsday prepper just yet, but it's smart to be aware of the potential risks.
So maybe skip that impulse purchase on the latest gadget and try to cut back on energy use at home.
Small steps can make a difference.
But it's not just about what individuals can do, right? Governments and businesses need to step up too.
Absolutely. They have a responsibility to help mitigate these risks, whether it's through policies to support vulnerable households or finding ways to adapt to a changing economic landscape.
So basically, we need to be prepared and stay informed.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
But before we wrap up this economic doom and gloom session, is there any good news? Any silver linings to this whole mess?
Well, crises often create opportunities, and this situation might be the push Europe needs to finally get serious about energy independence.
You mean like moving away from Russian gas?
Exactly. We're already seeing a renewed focus on renewable energy and diversifying energy sources.
So maybe this is a chance for Europe to build a more sustainable energy future.
It is, and that could have some economic benefits as well, creating jobs, driving innovation, leading to a more resilient economy.
Okay, so it's not all bad news. There's potential for positive change amidst all this uncertainty.
Exactly.
But one thing's for sure, this summit breakdown has started a chain reaction with big consequences, both politically and economically.
And understanding those consequences is crucial for navigating what comes next.
Well said. This has been quite the deep dive, but I think we're starting to get the bigger picture here.
We are, and as this story continues to unfold, we'll be here to help you make sense of it all.
Awesome. But for now, we need to shift gears a bit. When we come back, we'll be looking at how this summit is impacting global alliances and the idea of a world order. So stick with us. Okay, deep divers, we're back, and it's time for the grand finale of our deep dive into this Trump-Zelensky summit explosion. We've talked about the political fallout, the economic jitters, and now we're going to tackle the really big questions, the ones that keep world leaders awake at night.
We're talking about the future of global alliances, the balance of power. The very idea of a world order. Are we in for a wild ride?
It feels like someone just tossed a grenade into the world of international relations. Everything we thought we knew about global power is suddenly up in the air.
Yeah. It's true. The post-World War II order with the U.S. as the top dog has been kind of fading for a while, but this summit feels like it just sped things up like a sudden shift.
So are we witnessing the end of the American century as we know it? What comes next? Is it just going to be chaos with no one in charge?
Well, it's too early to say for sure, but this definitely points to a world where power is spread out more, no single country calling all the shots, a multipolar world.
Okay, so picture this: multiple power centers, the U.S., the EU, China, maybe even India and Brazil, all competing for influence. That's a whole new game. New rules, new alliances, new conflicts. Is it exciting? Is it scary?
It's both. It's unpredictable. For sure, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the future holds, but it also creates space for new voices, new ideas, new ways of tackling global problems.
Let's try to be optimistic here in this new world order. What's the best case scenario? How do we keep things from falling apart?
I think cooperation is key. Even if there are multiple power centers, countries still need to find ways to work together to solve those big challenges. Climate change, pandemics, economic instability, the big stuff.
So even if we're not all best friends, we still need to figure out how to share the playground.
Exactly. And that means building trust, talking to each other, finding common ground. It's not going to be easy, especially with all the tension and competition, but it's absolutely essential if we want to make this work.
It's a reminder that we're all connected no matter what the political landscape looks like.
Precisely, that sense of shared responsibility might be the only way to navigate this new world order that's emerging.
Well, there you have it, folks. A deep dive into a summit that shook the world, a geopolitical earthquake with aftershocks that we'll be feeling for a long time. We've explored the fallout, the power shifts, the economic worries, and those big, scary questions about the future.
And as always, we encourage you, our listeners, to keep digging into these issues, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, have those tough conversations about the world we want to create.
Because the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we make, the actions we take, and the conversations we have.
So go out there, deep divers. Arm yourselves with knowledge and help build the world you want to see.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.